Hey guys, welcome to Worship Drummer. We are so excited to have Travis Nunn here today.
Well, I started playing drums when I was probably in the sixth grade. I'd always wanted. I think I'd always wanted to play the drums. I'd always kind of gravitated towards that thing when I saw bands, on TV and stuff. And so about sixth grade, maybe the summer of that year, I conned my parents into buying me a drum kit. And so they bought me, the Pearl Export kit, which I think is basically everybody's first drum set. And so I started learning to play the drums, and then I really wanted to get involved at my church first, and so started kind of working my way into rotation at my church, like playing with a lot of the older guys, which was a really great thing. And just kind of worked my way up that way, through kind of playing worship music in churches, which ultimately was my heart, in music. And so I just kept, seeing, okay, I want to do this thing. Let me see if I can, get involved in this band and get involved in this thing and get in the studio with these guys. And kind of through moving churches, and as the years went on, I ended up at some big churches in Texas where they had really, really great circles of musicians.
Okay.
And one of them was a bunch of guys in Houston who were in the band called Caedmon's Call, which, if you listen to any like 90s, early 2000s, Christian music, Caedmon's was like the indie band, around that time. And so I really learned a lot from those guys, and getting to play with them at church when they were off the road and stuff. And was playing in a lot of bands outside of church, like playing in bars and playing cover gigs, and had a couple of original rock bands that I played in. And
Awesome.
but through all of that, as much as I love all of that stuff, being a part of leading worship in any capacity was really where my heart was. And so, man, I was doing that and making a living at it when I was probably 20, maybe 23.
Okay.
And through some random connections, I ended up getting a phone call from Chris Tomlin, who had just released or was recording a record called Arriving, which kind of
Okay.
like, pushed him into the mainstream. But I'd known about his music because I was learning it for all these churches I was playing in. And I'm like, I'm so sick of playing Chris Tomlin songs. Like, who is this guy?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I'm learning this stuff, and I started playing all the Passion stuff and everything. And I loved all the music, but I was like, why is everybody latching onto this like crazy? And then I got a call from him. And so I ended up going to meet up with the guys in Austin, Texas, where they were living. Went out on the road with them for about a month, and Chris hired me. I mean, it just all happened so fast. That was in about 2004. And then I moved from Houston, where I was living, to Austin to be a part of a church that they had planted. And then we were based out of Austin until 2009, when we moved to help Louis Giglio and the Passion people start a church here in Atlanta.
Oh, gotcha.
And so we've kind of moved all as a little group around a bit, but we're now based in Atlanta, part of a church called Passion City Church.
Okay.
And we're all kind of traveling and doing things out of here. So for the last 10 years straight, I've been playing and touring and recording with Chris and Passion. Yeah. Well, I grew up in a Christian home, and I'm sure that's a lot of people's story.
Yep.
So I was around the Bible, and I was around uh, like biblical teaching, and I was around the church from a really young age. But I just always kind of thought, well, this is just kind of what people do. I didn't really think it was anything, out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
until I was in about end of high school, maybe early college, when I started to kind of realize, okay, I want to like really know who, what the Bible says about who God is. I want to know really who Jesus is and was,
Hmm.
and what all this means in my life. And so it was, I mean, I, I got saved when I was in uh, middle school, but it's kind of one of those scenarios where you spend most of your time in a youth group
Yeah.
and you're around the church. I mean, it's like the church is your second home. And so you kind of know, okay, I feel led to give my life to the Lord and, figure out who Jesus is, but it wasn't until years later that I really found that I needed to dive in and figure out what that really means. That it's not just the act of, praying a prayer and asking, for
Yeah.
salvation. It's, okay, how do I walk this out? How does this apply to my life? And all those things. So I would say that I gave my life to the Lord in middle school, but it wasn't until college that I really started to understand what that truly means.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's definitely not like today. I however many years I've been out of college, but I'm not like going, oh yeah, man, I totally understand exactly what that means. I mean, I'll probably
Yeah.
be 60 years old still trying to figure out what that really means. What's funny is when you're in the middle of it, you don't realize it's happening. Um,
Hmm.
I think there are kind of. Let me rephrase that. You don't realize it's happening on a day-to-day basis. You realize it's
Okay.
happening every 3 or 4 years, maybe somewhere in there. It's like
Okay.
his record comes out, you get on the road, you start playing. You're touring like crazy. And then, when I first joined on with them, they just released Arriving, which has like How Great Is Our God on it, and,
Yeah.
Describable in some of these songs. And I wasn't paying attention to any of that because I was completely enthralled by the fact that finally I'm getting to actually tour, not
Yeah.
in the back of a, Toyota 4Runner and a trailer. I'm like, okay, I'm actually touring and I'm able to support myself.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you're out of an opening slot and it's like, hey, we're going to go out on some headlining dates. We're going to test that out. Then all of a sudden, 2 years later, it's like we're doing some more headlining dates and we're taking an opener out.
Okay.
And so things just started like happening. And then it's not till moments like when, 3 years into it, all of a sudden you get a phone call that says, hey, Chris has been nominated for a Grammy
Wow.
and we're sending you guys to the Grammys. And it's not Chris going, hey, I'm going to the Grammys. He's going, hey, you guys are going to the Grammys with us.
That's amazing, man.
So we all load up, as a little family, and we go to the Grammys. And, there's like, we had gone to the Dove Awards a few times here and there, but the Dove Awards are awesome, and that's great and all, but that there's like something happening when the Grammys is involved.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
And so it's like little things like that start happening. And then after that, it's like, oh, now there's a tour booked that's like, it's like a big tour. Like we're moving out of churches and into arenas. And
Hmm.
now there's 5 tour buses instead of one, and we have a crew bus. And so all these things just start like slowly building up. And then you kind of realize, oh, I can now draw a graph and see over 5 years what happened. Every record except for Arriving, I came in right the month that they finished tracking Arriving.
Okay.
And that was when Chris started first working with Ed Cash. And so every record of Tomlin's and Passion's from 2005 until 2012, all of Tomlin's band played on.
Wow. Okay.
Bass, drums, keys, guitar was me, Daniel, Matt Gilder, and Jesse Reeves. In 2012, Chris brought on a new producer who brought on Paul Mabury as an option to produce the rhythm section. And so that was kind of Paul's intro into the Tomlin world. And I had never met him until then. So he was around and he produced, basically the rhythm section, because the producer really wasn't a drummer. He didn't have the mind of a drummer or a bass player. He was thinking in guitar world, keys, and songwriting. And so he typically works with Paul as like his secondary half,
Yep.
So, and then so Paul's involvement started in about 2012.
Okay.
So,
Were you
fantastic drummer, by the way.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. Were you familiar with him before that?
The only stuff I was familiar with was a little bit of his earlier Hillsong stuff, and I'm trying to remember what else. Maybe that's it. I mean, I'd kind of heard his name here and there, and this was before he really concentrated a lot into producing. And so since then, he's produced like All Sons and Daughters and some other cool projects. And so,
yeah.
But man, he's a great player and a great teacher, and he's definitely got a studio mind. Something that I'm learning a lot, and sometimes the hard way right now. Like I did some sessions this weekend, and I've been on the road and playing live so much in the last decade that playing in the studio is something that's still a little foreign to me in terms of the dynamic, and because it's wildly different. I mean, they could not be more worlds apart, at least in my opinion. And so number one is have an open mind.
Yeah.
And if you are the guy who is the lowest on the totem pole as far as walking in, say you're the drummer walking into a session and it's like a bunch of seasoned guys. Walk in, be as humble as possible, be as open as possible. And if people are telling you what to do or correcting you or things of that nature, just take it. Because eventually you'll learn, the more you work in the studio, that you'll be able to build your confidence up through the other people kind of passing that knowledge on to you. My problem was always I would walk into the studio with hyper insecurity. Like I'm walking into a foreign world. These people probably think, oh, who's this guy? He doesn't belong here. I wish we had so-and-so.
Right, yeah.
Which in most cases is a lie. Totally. And so you're walking in, and so you're trying to assert you're like, hey, I know what I'm doing. Like, back off. Like, these kinds of things. And I've learned that that's just not the attitude. It's, please, like, I want to just be in the moment, go roll with the punches, and if I can learn anything from these guys, learn it, because the live touch is way different than the studio touch.
Yeah.
It's way different.